You will hear 7 short scenarios, each highlighting one or more of the after effects categories. Using your handout, please select the type of after effect that best fits the story.
My grandson, unfortunately, has been through the ringer. That is, he's witnessed a great deal of domestic violence in his mother's home. He lives with me now, but when any voice is raised, he blanks out and stares into space like a deer in the headlights.
Sorry, the child is showing the after effects of detachment when he blanks out and stares into space because of raised voices.
My 10-year-old foster daughter had been physically abused for several years before coming to live with us. Even though she's 10, she still wets her bed frequently and gets headaches and stomach aches all the time. We've been to every doctor and had every test, but we still can't figure out what's wrong.
Correct. The 10-year-old is showing the after effects of physical health problems.
We adopted our daughter, age 11, several years ago. She was removed from her family because of a lot of drug use and abuse. I understand she saw some domestic violence. She stresses out when making simple decisions like picking from a restaurant's menu.
Correct. This girl is experiencing either a cognitive and thought after effect, since she is having problems making decisions, which is part of her executive functioning, or it could be an emotional after effect of feeling overwhelmed.
I spent 2 hours last night helping my niece study for her math test. It was exhausting, but when we finished, I knew she was ready and would do well. When I picked her up from school, I found out she didn't even try. She just put her name on the test and turned it in blank.
Good job. The niece is showing the after effect of low self-concept. While another child in this situation might seem lazy, for a child with a complex trauma history, it is more likely that it never occurred to her that she was capable of passing the exam, even though she studied for it.
We once had an 8-year-old girl placed with us. I explained to her the house rules, that she was to make her bed, dress herself, and be ready to go to school prior to 8 a.m. I never had a child who did that on their very first day, but she had done everything I requested and was ready for school by 7.
Sorry, the correct response is behavior. This girl is being excessively compliant. It could just be that she's in the honeymoon phase, or it could be that she's learned to be fearful.
Jimmy, who is 7, moved in with us a month ago. He blows up for seemingly no apparent reason. I've tried to get him to express his feelings, but it's a no-go. Recently, my wife and I introduced him to a feelings thermometer to help him identify his feelings, but he has a difficult time knowing where to point.
Good choice. The answer is emotion.
My foster son joined our family 6 months ago. My understanding is that he experienced quite a bit of neglect and that his mom may have suffered herself from childhood trauma and mental illness. Since he arrived, he's continued to avoid me and withdraws whenever I try to comfort him. His social worker says he acts the same way during his visits with his family.
Good choice. The answer is attachment. This boy is showing potential signs of compromised attachment because he doesn't reach out for or doesn't accept comfort offered by his caregiver.
Chris, how does this information on after effects help in understanding the next section on current parenting practices?
First, parents need to think through the practices they are already using or have used with the child and then figure out if and how each of those strategies align with the 7 categories of after effects.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Say an 8-year-old boy has a pattern of screaming at his parents. The screaming is a sign of a behavioral or emotional after effect, and the parenting practice is to send him to his room. The parents have noticed, though, that sending him to his room hasn't changed his behavior. Therefore, in the results column, the parents would write that sending him to his room is not working.
It appears you're saying that we learn from strategies that don't work, as well as those that do.
Absolutely. There are no right or wrong answers here. It is entirely normal to have success in some situations and not in others, or even to have the successes change from day to day. We need to pay as much attention to what hasn't worked as to what has, and be flexible.
I see a part of the section is focused on nurturing sources of resiliency.
Yes. Previously, in Section 2 of the form, parents identified their child's sources of strength and resiliency. Now we're asking parents to identify their current parenting techniques that encourage those qualities.
Can we explore how this works with some examples?
Sure. Let's start with relationships and supports. It's common for children with complex trauma to struggle with understanding social situations and managing friendships. As explained earlier, parents should involve individuals who are already part of their child's life. These people should be part of the plan to build their child's ability to cope.
What happens if a child in care loves or idolizes someone the caregivers don't consider to be a positive role model, like an uncle who's a gang member? Should they support contact in these situations?
The answer is a definite maybe. There are no hard and fast rules here, and every situation is unique. However, even a person you might feel uncomfortable with could be a source of support for your child. I'm not saying you have to invite everyone to dinner, but maintaining some kind of connection might be worth considering.
What about the next category, talents and interests? Complimenting things a child does well seems obvious, but I'm sure there's more.
Yes, any talent or interest that helps the child feel confident or competent, no matter how small, could be seen as a sign of strength, and parents can use this as a foundation to build on. Even if a child is good at remembering to turn the lights off when leaving a room, parents might be well served to praise that.
I can see that. Children in care have enough people in their life noticing everything that isn't going well. Caregivers can build confidence by adding to the positive side of the scale. But what if a child has dreams and aspirations the parents feel are unrealistic, like being an NBA star or a top chef?
Having dreams for the future is a huge source of strength, and anything that gives a child hope is worthy of nurturing. That doesn't mean the child can live in a complete fantasy world, but there may be more value in encouraging a child to dream big and to have hopes, wishes, and aspirations than in teaching them about the real world.
Next on the forum is developing effective coping skills. How can resource parents nurture these skills to help a child heal from the after effects of complex trauma?
Anything a child does to help manage and adapt to his or her experiences could be a coping skill. Coping skills come in many forms. Activities like running, holding objects like a stuffed animal, visiting certain places or people, as well as focusing on a specific thought, phrase, or prayer. The key is to notice what coping skills are going right for the child and encouraging them to use them more often.
I can think of many ways of coping which are not healthy, like self-injury or using drugs.
True, and even good coping skills like running can be bad if done to extreme. Sometimes what parents will need to do is put the coping skill into context. For example, a 4-year-old, they may suck on a pacifier to self-soothe. While this certainly isn't good for their teeth, his parents are going to have to decide, is his ability to self-soothe using the pacifier outweighing the potential damage? Perhaps in this case, what the parents would do is decide to allow him to use the pacifier until they've helped him learn another method for self-soothing.
The last category on the forum is worldview. How do parents nurture a child's worldview?
Beyond the unconditional care that all kids need, a child also needs a sense of belonging and feeling connected to something larger. For kids, this connection can come from what is given as well as what is received. For example, To help their daughter feel like she belongs, a family might volunteer together at the food bank and compliment each other on their efforts to help.
Thank you, Chris. I think these examples will be helpful in the next section of the forum on trauma-informed parenting. This section of the Trauma-Sensitive Review Forum is our opportunity to pull together everything we've learned. Chris, how can you help us with this section?
This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of matching our parenting strategies to the needs of each individual child. When parents fill out this section, they should try to be as creative yet as specific as possible. Here are some points. Be sensitive to the child's trauma history as you know it. Actively look for potential connections between the child's current behaviors and prior experiences. Ensure the child feels physically and emotionally safe. Ask what he or she needs to feel safe. Provide consistency in routines and follow through on promises so that the child can learn that they can count on you. Reduce overwhelming emotions. Use games, books, and apps to actively teach feelings. Teach deep breathing and other self-calming strategies. Actively model the positive strategies you use to manage your own feelings. When the child is ready, help them process their unspoken thoughts and feelings. Build on the strengths and resiliencies of the child. Find ways for the child to connect with his or her past. Help with visits or contact with people and places. Write letters to or have pictures of loved ones. Work with the child to build a life book. Be creative. Support the interests of your child and don't use those interests as consequences, threats, or as a carrot to motivate the child. Encourage their involvement in the community through volunteering.
Thank you, Chris. In this handout section, we've added the essential elements of trauma-informed parenting, which offer some additional ideas.
Before we finish this section, I'd like to point out that trauma-informed parenting isn't easy, nor is it about giving kids free passes for challenging behaviors. In essence, it's about looking for clues and developing hunches about how traumatic experiences have impacted a child before deciding how to respond. It is also about focusing just as intensely on what is going well as what isn't. And it's for advocating for additional supports, because even though families have a tremendous opportunity to help children heal, they shouldn't have to do it alone.
I can see that we're also asking parents to adapt their parenting styles to the needs of each child and be willing to alter course if what they're doing doesn't seem to be helping.
Yes, this is a shift in how parents typically think about parenting, and it can be a hard shift to make. We have certain expectations of how our kids will respond, and when they don't, we often struggle to know what to do next.
Can you give us an example?
Say your 10-year-old foster daughter, Maria, dawdles about clearing the table. After multiple reminders, you take away her screen time for the evening. Now, with your birth child, this immediate consequence would be very effective. But with Maria, her reaction is to destroy her room instead.
So Maria's foster parents never expected that kind of response. That can be really frustrating for caregivers.
Which is exactly why our form can be helpful. It gives Maria's foster parents a chance to step back from the situation and reflect on why she might be acting that way. Perhaps her history of neglect has led to attachment issues, or it could be emotional and she has difficulty managing her frustrations. Once we come up with some hunches like these, we open ourselves up to new ways to respond.
So when her parents fill out the form, writing down that Maria is sent to her room is a strategy they should record.
Exactly. Again, we learn as much from what doesn't seem to work as we do from strategies that do work. One of the goals of the form is to help think through and identify which strategies are worth continuing and which we might want to change.
Is the form asking only for things we have done to correct a child's behavior, or should we also include steps we think will build strength?
Both corrective parenting and strength building should be included. We are often much better served by building skills or changing beliefs than by consequences. And in the case of foster children who carry a sense of hopelessness, negative reinforcement isn't as effective as it might be with other children.
Thank you, Chris. This was helpful. However, I think I would understand it